Hello, hello, friends. Welcome, welcome. Happy Wednesday. If you would, do me a favor really quickly. Go ahead and type into the chat, hello, I can hear you. We'll do a quick audio visual check just to make sure all is good while we're letting folks sign on. So if you're there, just let us know. All right, Erica, you were the first person to respond. Thank you, Erica. Appreciate that. And everyone else that's rolling in too. Welcome, welcome. We have, these are really quick sessions from Provider Trust, and we got another good one for you today. This is the second in a series of three. So as we've all been navigating guidance coming out at the federal and state level, we decided we would do our best every 2 weeks to just keep you, our friends and partners and clients in the industry, really well versed and well looped on what's going on, what's happened in the last 2 weeks, what are we anticipating to go on right now, just to make sure that you feel like you have a really good digest and to-do list of what we're hearing from the market, kind of where things are at in the world, specifically as it relates to vaccine mandates, and then hopefully a jump start into what to do for the next 2 weeks. So this is the second of three. 2 weeks from today, we have 3 of 3. We are right in the middle of, I think I'll just go ahead and kick things off with, we're right in the middle of what I would say waiting for any day the guidance to be released from CMS on federal vaccine mandates for those organizations that have 100 or more employees. It is anticipated to be released this week. This may be a situation in which that guidance actually even comes out while we're on the phone here this morning. So what we've got today is a bit of a preview into some of the things that are adjacent to that guidance. We hope to have that guidance this week, as do you all, and we'll wrap up on our third session 2 weeks from today, hopefully with a bit more interpretation once it's been publicly released. So we'll start there. There are 2 things to note coming into today. One is the CMS guidance. We're expecting any day, potentially even today, per some of the reports that are floating out there in the media. The second piece is that, October 15th, the public health emergency was extended for an additional 90 days. And so sometimes that can get a little lost with all the changes and all the flurry of activity happening from a regulatory standpoint. So just to make sure y'all are it's crystal clear, the public health emergency was extended for another 90 days on October 15th. So we're certainly in that now. With that, go ahead and introducing, if this is your first session with us, our Chief Compliance Officer, Donna Thiel, who will take us through a little bit more about what we're hearing and some of the speculation around the CMS guidance that we're anticipating every day. Just again, from what's been printed, what's been released, or potentially even what's been leaked over the past couple of days as we're all waiting. So Donna, kind of where are things at right now? What are we waiting on? And then what are we hearing in the market?
Thanks, Dave. Good morning to everybody. I was going to say good afternoon to those of you on the East, but no, it's still morning for you all too. So good morning. Happy Wednesday. I'm glad to be back with all of you. Like Dave said, we're just kind of waiting. We've been, everything was supposed to come out in the middle of October and then the end of October, and now it's November 2nd or 3rd or something, and we're still waiting. Over the weekend, Bloomberg did have an article where they talked to, 2 anonymous sources that shared a little bit of information. So the little bit relative to the OSHA requirement, or the OSHA guidance that's coming for the 100 employee organizations. Some of the highlights of that related to what our employers going to pay for, what our employee expectations. It basically says that employers will be, what they're sharing anyways, again, this is not the published guidance, just so we're all on the same page, but that employers would be required to pay for testing and masks for any of those employees that qualify for one of those exemptions. It also talks about requiring unvaccinated workers to wear masks while they're indoors. And then it talks about businesses choosing whether or not they pay for weekly tests and masks for unvaccinated workers if they refuse to get the vaccine. Now, that part to me feels a little confusing. If we have a regulatory requirement that everyone has to get vaccinated, or they have to have an exemption, it feels peculiar that you would be putting in guidelines for those that have chosen not to get vaccinated and have not filed an exemption. So it also talks about potential penalties. So I think that's an area where we really don't have any idea what the penalties are going to look like. If we remember from our conversation a couple weeks back, for the federal contractors and the requirements that we looked at last time, both of the pieces of guidance were silent as it comes to penalties relative to failure to comply for the different organizations. So I think, it's a little maybe sneak peek into what we might be seeing, but I know we're all anxious to see the final guidance and figure out how to deal with that. But those are a little bit of highlights from the Bloomberg article this weekend.
Thank you, Donna. For those that are following along, I dropped that in the chat just so you get a sense of what we're referencing. Again, just to close the book on that, it is speculation at this point because we're waiting on that guidance to come out any day now, potentially even today. So if the thing to be on the lookout for is to stay close to that as that comes out, and then fingers crossed, it'll be out within the next 2 weeks. And then our next session 2 weeks from today, we'll be able to address it a little bit more thoroughly. Let's transition now from what we do know and what has been happening and what we can actually really report on today. Let's start actually with vaccine mandate guidance released from the Office of Personnel Management on some of their recommendations, some of their guidance. So Donna, take us through a little bit about kind of what has happened in the last 2 weeks and what do we know?
Great. And I think, Dave, some of this too, just to follow up from last week, we had some questions from some of our participants around, like, what do I do if I have folks that aren't vaccinated? Is it an employment issue? Is it a failure to perform issue? Like, what are the issues that we're talking about? So we use that guidance that you're talking about from the federal contractor, and maybe we can just talk a little bit about what we know from there and what the guidance is that they're saying to try to answer some of these questions. And I think it's important to look at that guidance and I think some of the coaching almost that they're giving us, right? In the guidance that we received a couple weeks back, they said there needs to be a period of education, of awareness, and giving folks another opportunity for us to partner with them to share the information that's available. So in the OPM guidance, it talks about like a 5-day period, give or take, from that education period. And then before you go into a next step that would feel like a suspension. And they talk about, a short unpaid suspension, perhaps, 14 days or less. But then when it gets to the point of someone making that decision not to get vaccinated, not to have requested an exemption, then they kind of like punt it, right? Then they put it back in the hands of legal and really saying, you need to talk to the Office of Counsel. You need to talk to the HR professionals. So I think, the guidance that we're hearing, and anyone can Google today, law firm after law firm after law firm who has done many, many, many webinars on fair labor practices and what you need to do. So I think the guidance that I would take, and specifically answering the question from last time, is, this is a federal regulation. We all have to follow these regulations, and you as an organization need to put policies and procedures around that to protect yourselves and put in a process that's repeatable, it's consistent, that you feel comfortable that you're dotting all your I's, crossing all your T's, and everyone's staying in line. So using this guidance, give everybody an opportunity for education, really just like a traditional compliance and HR function, right? You suspend almost pending investigation, right? You're just looking at it. You're trying to make sure that there's nothing else that we can do. And then before you make any final decision, you're really working with HR and legal to make sure that we've met both the regulatory requirements, the fair labor practices, and that we're appropriately responding and handling the situation. So again, hopeful that CMS, when it comes out with their guidance, or OSHA, certainly when they come out with their guidance, they'll be a little bit more explicit. But I think we can leverage the federal contractor information and the guidance that's already been published to answer that question.
Awesome. Thank you, Donna. For those following on Zoom, I did link the guidance that we're referencing as well. So you have kind of exactly what we're talking about as a primary source. And so if you're looking to please make sure you grab that link before the Zoom ends. so that you have the specific guidance and can kind of take that with you and digest it yourself in a bit more detail with a bit more time. These sessions are really brief, and so we've got one more topic for today, just again to really keep us focused on what's happening, what do we know, and then what are we looking forward towards. The last piece here is legal challenges and some of the things that have happened in the last couple of weeks as it relates to just what's been going on in the legal world. And there's been some fascinating examples of this at a federal and at a state level of some legal challenges to some of this guidance already that we're seeing. Particularly want to focus on the state of Iowa and what's been happening there as well. And so, Donna, let's start with Iowa and then maybe go into some of the other examples along the way.
You bet. Yeah, there's all sorts of examples, and depending on what state you're in, I'm sure that you're following even more closely than Dave and I are. But in Iowa, just last week, they passed a bill. And I'm just looking at my notes here so I don't misspeak, but it will allow state residents to qualify for unemployment benefits. So in most of the things that we've been reading, it's like, nope, if you don't get vaccinated, if you lose your job, then sorry, there's no benefits for you. But what this is saying is interesting. If you lose your job as a result of refusing to get vaccinated, but you had one of the exemptions, we will give you unemployment benefits. So basically what that is saying is that even though you filed for an exemption and you received an exemption, if your organization fired you, terminated you, they'll help with unemployment benefits. So it's just an interesting situation where basically there's organizations evidently that are choosing not to allow exemptions, right? And so the state's coming in and saying, hey, if you have an exemption and that's the reason you've chosen not to get vaccinated, we are going to support you with unemployment benefits. So that passed last week. There's lots of commentary around the different political positions of the state of Iowa and who's supporting what that you can look into. But that's the first one where I've seen where there's been an explicit bill that's been passed as it relates to unemployment benefits. I think there's another state that I want to highlight is Louisiana. I think it's a really interesting case. And I think from a provider perspective, really speaks to the challenges that the providers are going to be up against. So the particular article was highlighting a situation for Ochsner, a very large health system in Louisiana. And it was highlighting that in the Second Circuit, there was a ruling that a judge had to hold a hearing on the mandate and blocking enforcement of the mandate. So basically saying in the Second Circuit, Ochsner, you can't begin to mandate vaccines. There's going to be more of an appeal process, more things, more rulings that have to happen before you can enforce the mandate, only in the Second Circuit. In the Third Circuit Court, that court ruled there is no issue with the mandate and you can proceed to implement. So now here you have an organization in one state that in one circuit court, I believe it's the northern part of Louisiana, I apologize, I think that's correct, is saying, nope, we don't think that this mandate has legal basis and therefore you can't implement, but then all the other areas in Louisiana you can. So now here you are, a health system who operates throughout the state has to determine what's the mandate, where am I obligated to implement this, this regulation, and where am I almost prohibited from doing that? So I think Louisiana is a very interesting case where we as providers following that, trying to figure out what, really working, of course, with counsel, how are we going to navigate this? So I think Louisiana is a very interesting case to follow. Another one I just wanted to highlight that perhaps is maybe a bit more troublesome from the provider perspective is the state of Connecticut. In the state of Connecticut, they have already fined 26 long-term care facilities over $220,000. And they're saying that they could actually collect nearly $15 million if the providers don't start complying. There is a grace period. There's a lot of conversation about the intent of the regulations. Certainly the intent was to get people vaccinated, right? And to have a safe environment. But the punitive side of it comes at an expense, right? Any healthcare provider knows, trying to get staff and equipment and PPE and all of those things that we need, there's a lot of cost to that. And now adding on real penalties to that is really difficult for the providers. So there's a lot going on in Connecticut to counterbalance those fines, but they're already starting to fine nursing facilities. So I think every day we see more legal challenges. We know in Texas, right, that the Texas Attorney General has filed suit against the Biden administration. I mean, there's every different lawsuit that's coming. And I think as soon as the guidance comes out from CMS, I think we're going to see a lot more, and from OSHA. So more to come, lots of state stuff happening. And again, we'll hope in the next 2 weeks to have a bit more information and give some more real world examples of what we're seeing in the different states that's happening around us.
Yeah. Thank you, Donna, so much. A few folks had asked, I apologize. I was chatting to myself accidentally early on so I was sending myself all the links. I believe they should be there now. So if you go into the chat in Zoom, we referenced a few things today. I dropped the primary sources of some of the things that we were referencing directly in Zoom. So go ahead and grab them now before Zoom ends, just so you have those hyperlinks and you have those sources for you to review on your own. There's been several folks that have joined on and kind of missed the first minute or two. So just to quickly recap where we started, we are waiting on the CMS guidance. It is anticipated to be released this week, as per just reports and kind of what we're seeing in the media. And so we're in the second of 3 of our series. Our next and last in this series will be 2 weeks from today. And we certainly anticipate having that guidance and being able to go through it in a little bit more detail in 2 weeks from today for our next session. And then the last update is just to make sure everybody heard it clearly, because some folks jumped on, is the public health emergency is extended for an additional 90 days as of October 15th. And certainly we are in that period now. Friends, that wraps us for our session today. Again, the goal of these is to keep it short, sweet, and really current on what's happening and what are we waiting for. We will we'll be on the lookout for the CMS guidance. If you have any questions in the interim, or if there's anything that we can help answer about anything that we covered today, please feel free to reach out to us and ask us questions. That's it, friends. Have a wonderful rest of your Wednesday. Be on the lookout for an invite to the last in our series of 3, when we'll hopefully, fingers crossed, be able to cover the CMS guidance in a little bit more detail than as it's released publicly. That's it, friends. Have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thanks, everyone.